So, welcome. Good morning to Interactions of Land Use and Transport. I'm happy to be back again for one of the last sessions in this course, and this is on transportation demand management. So, this is not only, let's say, an outlook of what perhaps we are focusing on in the field of study number 3, that is also entitled Transportation Demand Management in Transportation Systems, but it's also the idea to close up the semester with a larger picture on strategies that really are influencing the travel demand on different levels. Yeah? And I also, that's a learning objective, will try to explain to you at least our understanding of the differences between what we do call mobility management, that is more acting directly on the travel demand, and then traffic management, that is shaping the traffic flow, the traffic situation in networks, and the larger concept of transportation demand management. I will show an example that we have been working on some years ago here for the campus of Weihenstephan, and I will go through these different concepts that you will also need to be aware about for the final exams. I hope you have enjoyed the last sessions. So that was on the different scales of action. We have started before Christmas with the regional scale of integrated mobility concepts, but you have been with Sebastian Seisenberger and also Anna Rivas over the last couple of sessions on the other very important scales that we are able to influence the interactions of land use and transport. So we can go for the integration of land use and transport, and that is the scale of the neighborhood. The 15-minute cities, I think Sebastian has been a great expert on that. And then the second level is which level? Or the third, the region, the neighborhood, and then the last one is the street level, exactly. Yeah? So we have rediscovered somehow also over the past years with the COVID pandemic and the activities on street experiments that yes, we have a very strong lever of change in shaping the layout of urban streets. How much space do we provide for parking? How do we regulate the cycling transport, for example? How much space do we give for pedestrians? Yeah? So this is highly influencing the conditions of travel just in front of our doorstep. And that's why I think it's really important to look into the level of urban streets as well. Is there questions that have come up from that lectures on urban streets or the neighborhood? I haven't checked all the details on the web, but I have the impression that there's not so much discussion going on online. So I ask here in the class, as you are here, great that you are here, at least a small group. Yeah, so if you have questions, please come up with these questions now. I can try to clarify. Is there anything you have to comment on or that you didn't really get? Okay, fine. Then I hope everything's clear also when we are asking the questions. So today, transportation demand management, and then last session next week, we will still have one session together with Sebastian, where we will have a review. We will also discuss the points that are important for us and that also are important for the exam. And we will give a short conclusions and outlook then on the program. All right. So once again, the bubble chart, the orange slide on the interactions of land use and transport. there is some remaining levers for action that we want to address today. And it's entitled here, Act, Not React. So that basically means that we should not take transportation travel demand, so the number of people traveling by car or something like this, or the vehicle kilometers traveled, that's the most important indicator, for granted. So we should not accept, let's say, what the travel demand forecast is telling us, but we rather should try to shape this travel demand. We should act on this travel demand, and that's where we want to address strategies today on transportation demand management. As mentioned earlier, the first one, and I think this is also something that is quite well established, is the mobility management. And to cut it short, also for your understanding, everything that is trying to act on travel demand without changing the transport supply and without changing the land use, so basically without changing the structural conditions, the infrastructure, the long-term strategic conditions of travel, but is really addressing the demand itself, our activities. This is something that we can call mobility management. I will give the definitions later, but it's basically a demand-oriented approach by information, communication, cooperation that addresses the travel demand. Yeah? As an example, we could say there is new residents coming to Munich. Perhaps you have come to Munich also in the past years, and then the city is sending to you as a new resident of the city an information package about the options of travel that you do have in this city and that perhaps you are not aware about yet. Yeah? So it's an awareness campaign to make you familiar with the public transport system, with the car sharing system, with the biking conditions and so on, and basically is encouraging you to not buy a car. Yeah? When moving to Munich, you don't need to buy a car, you can sell a car. Yeah? So that's the intention behind. But it doesn't change anything on the conditions, it's just an information package that you get. Who of you did get such an information package? Oh, great. See, there is some of you. Yeah. So it should be all of you somehow that get these framework conditions explained, and this is probably changing your behavior. Did you change your behavior because of the information package?
Actually, me not, because I was already using, like, commuting by the transit. I don't have a car here, so that didn't.
Okay.
But I still thought it was a good campaign.
Yeah. Okay, so it didn't change your individual behavior, but perhaps you got a good impression of the city, a good image, and yeah, you perhaps confirmed what you do or told others how to do, and that also has an impact. Yeah? Okay, thank you very much. The second, and it's perhaps not complete, is the investment and operation of the transportation system itself. So as an example, let's run the subways at night. Yeah? So that's what actually has been introduced, finally, to the city of Munich. So a change in the operation of the subway system, so the U-Bahn, the subway, the metro, now goes not only on Friday or Saturday, but on all the days of the week, goes at night. So this is a change in the policy of how to run the system, and that obviously should also influence travel demand. So it's a travel demand management strategy, but it's not a mobility management strategy, because it actually changes the transport supply, right? And there might be other strategies, more integrated packages that also address land use that we shall consider as travel demand management, but that's something that we can discuss later. Is that more or less clear as a starting point? Okay, I think it's not too bad to have this chart in mind to situate the activities that we are able to do, and in fact the measures, the implementation strategies that we can address if we want to influence the system overall. Those measures and strategies are usually included in a larger context. Martin Schreiner has been talking about this, of sustainable urban mobility planning. It doesn't always need to be a formalized SUMP, as it is called, but it is included in a strategic setup of the mobility management overall. We will also deepen these planning procedures and the instruments in a course in the summer term that is called Transportation Policies and Project Design. So also for those who are interested in getting deeper into these planning strategies and planning instruments are warmly invited. Now first I want to talk about an example, as announced earlier, that we have been able to run together with a partner for the participation formats on the campus of Weihenstephan. Probably you know that TUM has several locations, so not only here in the city center, but in Garching, in Ottobrunn, I think in Straubing, even in Heilbronn, and also in the city of Freising. Who has ever been to the campus of Weihenstephan? You have never been? Okay, you should go there. You can also go there on a weekend, because it's actually a very nice place. So the city of Freising itself always merits a visit, specifically because they have a big festivity at the moment of a jubilee of the bishop that founded the city of Freising, Corbinian. So there's some nice events. And also this is a place that is located close to the city center, that is over here, and that has a nice hilly landscape with some very beautiful gardens. So if you ever go to Freising, don't miss to climb up the hill to Weihenstephan, where actually also the TUM main campus, and then there's a lot of other activities all spread around a bit. Here is a very nice historic hill where you do have the nice gardens, and you also have the earliest brewery of the world. The Weihenstephan beer comes from here as well. So it's worth going to see it. But if you go and see it, then you will also see that this campus is not a green campus as it is claimed, because there's also a lot of landscape architecture and food and other activities that are dealt with regarding the disciplines, but it's rather a campus that is suffering a lot from parking problems. Obviously the location is not super central, and also a lot of employees and a lot of students live in the vicinities all around Freising, and the connections specifically in public transport are rather bad. We will see that also later, because the station of Freising, the S-Bahn station, is the central hub. So you have to have a lot of changes if you want to go to the campus of Weihenstephan. Here is the railway station, You always need to change at the railway station to then go up the hill to Weinstefan. So the conditions are rather bad, and parking is for free. Yeah? And we have run this strategy also together with the partners from the different institutions. It's not only TU München, but it's also the Hochschule Weinstefan-Triesdorf, so a University of Applied Sciences. There are some Fraunhofer institutes, and there is also state-owned research institutions that we have been working with. And one of the claims was that I have suggested in the discussion was to say you can build as much parking as you want on this campus. This is always going to be crowded as long as there's no good alternatives and as long as there's no pricing on the parking. Yeah, so if the parking is for free, then always a lot of people will come and take advantage of the good accessibility in private car to go there. And you see it's overcrowded, so the parking exceeds the capacity. There is safety issues also in considering the access for example, mobility reduced persons. And the image of the campus was in danger because of this claim of green campus. They also had an environmental strategy to really be a positive scene in this, but they had some challenges on that. So that was the starting point. We organized then a series of activities in this project over a couple of years with a lot of workshops and working group meetings together with the partners, but also with a dedicated analysis of the situation. And then we came up with some suggestions, and we included a lot also the people that are affected by this. So we had a very important participation workshop where we were inviting employees and students to discuss with us the specific suggestions. And then we came up with a strategy recommendation to the partners, and I will briefly report on that. A first part of the analysis obviously was the travel behavior analysis. We actually have been able to run an online survey with the employees and the students, and we have had a very good feedback of more than 2,000 students responding and more than 1,500 employees. And my interpretation of this chart was that actually the majority of people coming to that campus does not come by car. If you go there, there's cars all over the place, but the majority of people, specifically the students, but also overall, is using other modes than private car, right? So there's a lot of cycling, 30% with the students, 25% with the employees, something that you don't actually see. You just see that there's a lack of good cycle parking facilities, for example. Yeah, that was one very easy recommendation to derive from that. There's not so much walking because it's more like an island on the top of the hill, a bit outside of the city center, so it's not easy to get there by walking, only if you live very close by, of course. And that was more a recommendation that goes into why not providing more student housing, guest researchers housing, and more integrated urban development to this location to make it less an island and more a part of the city of Freising. Then we have quite some public transport, 8% with the employees, 15% with the students, and we will see that this is largely dominated by the trips that people take from the city of Munich to Freising and then to Weinstefan. But still, yes, obviously a very large share of the employees and still an important share for students of people getting there by private car. It's interesting to see that mode split over distance, and it's specifically interesting to see that, let's say, up to 2, up to 5 kilometers, there's very few people coming by car, and there's an extremely high amount of people going by bike. There's even a lot of people going by walking if they are really living close by. Yeah? And that is perhaps a dramatic situation as well. There is very, very few people coming by public transport. So people who are living within the city of Freising, either they go by bike or they go by car. But they don't take the bus because of this change at the railway station. Yeah? So you have to change in order to get there. It will take you quite some time, and it's perhaps not reliable enough. The public transport users here come from more distant places. Specifically, this one here is largely the city of Munich. So there is a very high share of students going by public transport, but still there is a lot of people going by car, and they all crumble on the parking lots. A second observation that we were able to do is based on a parking survey. So we were controlling the capacity of the parking lots in these different areas, and we were checking how many cars are in these parking lots on the different times of the day, and we were also checking when do they leave again. Yeah? So you can see here that obviously early in the morning there's not a big problem. So if you start before 8 o'clock, you will easily find a parking spot. But you also see that some of the places already have a relatively high saturation rate. Then there is the critical times in the morning. The first parking spots that will be full, more than 100%, are exactly here up of the hill, where you find these ancient buildings and nice gardens. And this is then going on over the morning up to a peak hour that is basically up to 11, up to 12 o'clock, but you see it's already getting a bit better. So in the morning, 10, 11, that is the highest traffic load that the campus is suffering from. But starting with the lunch break, starting with the end of the morning, there is already a lot of people leaving again. So there might be students who don't have lectures the whole day. There might also be employees that do only work part-time. Yeah? So they are leaving again, and already at 2 o'clock, more or less, the problem is solved. Yeah? So the capacity problem on the parking is a pressing problem. That was the starting point for the whole study. But it is not affecting the complete day, but it's only affecting some hours in the morning. So perhaps we can learn from this to establish more flexible work time or shaping the schedules of the lectures in a different way to handle this problem as well. So all green again. Everybody went home. Yeah, we did some more analysis. Perhaps I go quickly on that, but it's basically confirming what I was saying earlier, The public transport accessibility, here is the campus of Weinstefan, is quite okay along the lines that are passing by, and these lines then go to the S-Bahn station down here. But what is really a critical point is that for all the other places that is here, not very far from the campus, this is all the residential areas of Freising. The time you need to get to the campus is up to a half an hour. Yeah? And this is only for 2, 3, 5 kilometers. So you will hardly accept such a bad travel time for such a short distance. And that's why another recommendation was to restructure the public transport network and to take the hub of Weinstefan as a major public transport destination into this network definition, so that we can reduce the number of changes and reduce the travel time to get to the campus. A second minor addition, in my opinion, was that the partners on the campus basically already agreed on an additional bus stop up of the hill, because it's quite exhausting to take a walk from the bus stop down on the road to up of the hill. Yeah? So they wanted to have an additional bus stop up of the hill. Okay, now based on that, we formulated our objectives and different activities. And this is now getting closer to what we could call a transportation demand management strategy. Interestingly enough, the formal title of the study was a mobility management concept, but obviously we did not limit our strategies to the soft measures only, but we really developed a transportation demand management strategy. And that was on different levels of action, like for example the location quality, so the land use questions. We wanted to maintain the attractiveness of the green campus with an attractive campus layout and design, and we wanted to improve the accessibility and mobility options. So this includes land use strategies, for example, student housing and so on. Yeah? Then a second level of activities or objectives was on avoid traffic. We will see later there is a classical strategy that is avoid, shift, improve. Perhaps you have heard about such a strategy already. Yeah? So we want to avoid car traffic, we want to reduce the car traffic. Here we want to reduce the number and the length of car trips, and we want to improve a local network on neighborhood mobility. So avoid traffic, shift traffic on other modes. Here specifically we want to act on the mode share. So we want to reduce the share of motorized trips for commuting and business trips, increase the use of public transport, cycling and walking, and based on this, reduce the parking pressure, the parking demand, the parking problems. So avoid, shift on other modes, and then improve. Here is translated into increase the efficiency. So work on the existing traffic situations by improving the operations. Improving the capacity and the use existing capacities better, use parking space more evenly, increase the use of public transport, carpooling and electric mobility, and so on and so forth. We didn't achieve on all these objectives. I don't know exactly if there is real implementation strategies. but we came up with a strategic framework of how to do the implementation of such ideas. And we were starting, I think, with the parking management. So as I mentioned earlier, without having a more restrictive approach on the parking situation, also most of the other measures would have less of an impact. So you need to have push and pull activities. So the pull activities to drag into more sustainable modes are listed down here. But if you don't have the push activities, then these measures will be less effective. And that's why this is central. But going by the numbers, we have a round table on housing, so how to include better housing opportunities. We have the location quality, so how to increase the layout of the walking network, for example, or the aspect of the whole area. Then for the walking situation, we have focused on one specific measure, that is a pedestrian guidance system, so that you signalize it's just 3 minutes to walk to this and that kind of institution. Specifically, if you come from the railway station, it's not very far to walk up the hill. It's perhaps 10 minutes, 15 minutes walking, and it's a very nice trip. So you could also encourage people to walk from the city center, from the railway station, to discover this area. Then for the cycling, I mentioned earlier, the key measure that we were recommending was to strongly improve the bike parking situation, because that was really lacking. And then with the public transport system, I have already talked about the additional bus stop, and we added something like a shuttle bus that would also go within the campus, that is quite widespread, to connect the different locations, perhaps also to connect them with the parking facilities that might be a bit further away, because sometimes people even took their car to go from the lecture hall to the Mensa. Yeah, so just up the hill, down the hill. This was quite surprising to observe that this was happening. And then for the, let's say, car whatsoever sharing mobility, we did not recommend a bike sharing system or a car sharing system, because we thought this would not really affect the commuting situation of daily travelers. But we were rather focusing on a carpooling platform, so that you can organize your trips together, so that students can come by car with their professor, to make this example. Yeah? If they both share the same trip, they could connect and share the ride. So share the ride in private cars. And last but not least, an information package. So all these nice measures have been suggested, and we have suggested to implement a campus management system for the different institutions, so that all these projects would be followed up by a project management. We have defined responsible partners and next steps, but we were quite convinced that we need something like a mobility manager for the corporate mobility management of the campus. And we were formulating also this request to the former president, so Wolfgang Herrmann of TUM. Unfortunately, this was not approved. And with this, also most of the other projects were not followed up with the necessary priority, unfortunately. Yeah? So I think this whole concept largely is depending on the coordination of actors, the information, and so on, to really put these projects forward. And this would be the role of a mobility manager, but that role has not been seen to be important enough. All right, questions to the project. It's dating back some time, but it's still, I think, up to date. Go and see to Weinstefan if the situations have changed. Yes, please?
What do you mean by carpooling, for example? What has been done concretely?
So what do we mean by a carpooling platform concretely? We have been testing different carpooling platforms at that time, and we have recommended one platform that is a professional corporate carpooling platform. I think it's called Flink, where the institutions, so the Fraunhofer Institution, the University of Applied Science, the TUM, and all the other partners could connect to, and where then supply and demand of such trips would be matched. Yeah? So what you can do in such a platform, I guess you know this, is you can offer a trip. You can say, look, I'm going to Campus Weinstefan every day from Donauwörth, yeah? And then somebody else might say, okay, great, this is also my connection, so can I join you? So these two can match and can share the ride. Okay, other questions? Yes, please.
Can you explain more about the roundtable housing?
So if I can explain more on the roundtable housing, yes, as mentioned earlier, we have seen that there is very few people living very close to the campus of Weinstefan. There is a lot of students housing in the city of Weinstefan. There's also some student housing facilities, but most of them are living all around the city and region of Freising, and it's getting rural very, very quick. Yeah? So people are living more or less in the countryside. And if they are living in the countryside, then they will have a hard time to get to the campus without a car. And that's why we were addressing this challenge to say it would be good to provide better housing opportunities for students, but also for guest research or employees close to the campus of Weinstefan. So that would be a cooperation between the Studentenwerk, the city of Freising, the TUM, and so on. And the roundtable should bring these partners together to reflect on options that they have to develop student housing accommodation on the campus or next to the campus. Last question. Yes?
Can you explain again about the mobility manager and why it hasn't been implemented?
Yeah, well, I could, yeah. So the mobility manager, generally spoken, is a manager. So it's somebody who should take care about the implementation of all these projects together with the different partners on the campus. In a more classical sense, you would have rather a mobility manager on behalf of the city. So you can have a municipal mobility management program that a mobility manager, being a member of the Department of Mobility of the city, is organizing. But you can also have a mobility manager by the businesses, so by the firms, by the companies, by the institutions that are running an office location. Yeah? So a big office location like BMW will have a mobility manager to take care about the mobility concerns of their employees. And in this specific case, we were suggesting to have a mobility manager for the campus. So it's a mixed shared responsibility from the different institutions. And that was quite complicated because there's nothing like a campus management GmbH or so. Yeah? So there's the TUM, there's the University of Applied Sciences, there's state-owned research institutes, Fraunhofer, the city of Freising, so there were a lot of partners. And we were suggesting this to have one person at quite a high level of salary to be able to negotiate with all the different partners to get that stuff done. And we suggested this to the different partners, but basically the president of TUM was saying literally, why should we have another manager without a business? So you cannot earn money with that. You need to spend money on it. Yeah? And he was not ready to spend money on it, basically. But I want to start with this picture that we have drafted some years ago to help you differentiating the different pieces of the puzzle. So transportation demand management, this is what we have just been talking about, is the more holistic approach to really shape the demand. And this can include, yes, also changes on the transport supply. It can include changes on the land use, whereas mobility management only is part of it, fully integrated into the transportation demand management, but is more on organizational actions and the given supply. And then last but not least, traffic management will partly address the travel demand, but mostly, I think it should even be further down to the corner of on the right, will largely influence the traffic situation itself, but not so much the number of trips being made in this or that kind of car. Okay, here are some definitions and some reflection on that. Transportation demand management is a general term for strategies that aim to maximize the efficiency of the transport system, are intended to reduce and redistribute travel demand by changing mode choice, number and length of trips. Yeah? So that's what we have discussed. There's a great recommendation here. You see the online encyclopedia of Todd Littman, Victoria, Canada, I think, George, yeah? And he has listed a whole library of strategies of transportation demand management. I think that's very worth looking into it if you go into your study projects or thesis projects, then you might find a lot of material here. You also might find some material in a conference that we have done many years ago. Here at TUM, the Mobile TUM conference 2012, with a nice documentation in a book of the key ideas that have been presented there, and you will find it on the website. That would be on transportation demand management. The second level that we have been addressing is mobility management. I think this is quite a European term. So I think in US, Canada, other countries, mobility management might be understood more in the way of transportation demand management. But very clearly on the European level, we understand here a concept that is acting through soft measures. For example, information, communication, organization, coordination. Some of these items have popped up earlier. And again, I think it's relatively easy to make the difference. Mobility management, in my understanding, would be everything that is not changing transport supply or land use. You have here some references, guidelines, and a super well operated platform on the European level, the EPOM European platform on mobility management, where you do find many interesting examples, sources, and also events to put that forward. And last but not least, the traffic management we will only touch briefly here is addressing the optimization of the traffic flow within networks. And this is basically what you will find with other colleagues like Klaus Bogenberger or Costas Antonio to optimize the operation of the transportation systems in intelligent transportation systems and so on and so on. So to optimize the traffic flow, route choice, departure time, but does not influence the travel demand per se. I think that's important. The origin-destination trips and the mode choice mostly are taken as a starting point. Yeah? So, an overview on the options of travel demand management. This is not the flower of proximity, but it's the flower of mobility options that you do have within TDM at large. And you could say accessibility planning, it somehow appeared also in your reply. Yes, is part of it. Yeah, shaping the land use structure, the transport system in a way that you increase the travel options to go to your destination also without your own car, or driving alone in a car also is something that often is addressed. Then we have the spatial structure, density, diversity design, transit-oriented development, integrated concepts that we have seen. This all goes into transportation demand management strategies. And then yes, you can also include the transport supply side, including pricing strategies, yeah, that are most often quite direct in their effects, like congestion charging or pricing the parking costs that is listed here on its own. And then last but not least, it's perhaps not spelled out super well, measures acting on the activities, mobility management. Yeah? So that is, when you look at this orange bubble chart, then the mobility management really goes on the activities, the mobility choices of people that they can do because of information, communication, campaigning, marketing, and so on. Is that clear? I think it's a good overview for you to reference how you can address travel demand. Then the classical scheme of avoid, shift, improve. You can read a lot about this in the literature. Sometimes it's not very clear because it quickly gets ideologic. Yeah? If you say, I want to avoid car trips, then you might be heavily criticized in practice because why? Yeah? And I think you always need to explain why. But in fact, yes, obviously you want to reduce the vehicle kilometers traveled. Yeah? So that means that you want to reduce the trip lengths, you want to increase the occupancy rates. Yeah? So you're not against cars as such, but you want to reduce the impact that car travel has on our cities, on our environment, on the space consumption, on the emissions, and so on. The second is more classical, shift towards more environmentally friendly modes. And also public transport has to be competitive in a way. Running a diesel bus with just some people inside perhaps is not really environmentally friendly. Yeah, so we also need to challenge this and say, okay, rather go with an electric bus, or rather go with a smaller bus, or rather try to get more people inside. Yeah? So this is not automatically better, but it provides better options. And last but not least, on the efficiency, this is partly more a question of traffic management, but it is still important for all the questions that we cannot address on the other levels. So travel demand management, it's listed here, will rather, yeah, no, it works, will rather work on the avoid and shift strategies and not so much on the improve strategies, right? We have seen part of this, I don't need to read it out. Very much simplified, this goes into a perspective of push and pull measures. I've already briefly touched upon this in the example. So we can develop nice ideas on how to make cycling more attractive, on how to make public transport more efficient, on how to increase the walking. But we also, in order to really get into a shift, into a Verkehrswende, yeah, so into a mobility turn, we specifically also need to address the restrictions in the modes that we don't want to see. So restrictions in car traffic specifically, restrictions in parking fees, and so on. And here's some top 10 principles of successful parking management. See, this comes from the TDM website of Todd Littman. I don't need to go into the details. Here's another way of differentiating what do we actually mean by mobility management, what do we actually mean by traffic management, what do we mean by transport planning. And you could say transportation demand management is encompassing most of these bubbles. Yeah? This is coming from the FGSV, so the German guidelines on transport systems. And you can see that transport planning is more on the supply side, more on the infrastructure measures. Mobility management, I don't know why the bubble is so small. It could be bigger. Yeah? Is on the demand-oriented, the soft measures. And traffic management somehow is in between. So it's another way of representing this. I think it's not complete. I think it's not perfect, but it might help to sort this out. If we shed some light on mobility management as such, I like to refer to this also not very up-to-date, but more historic diagram that I've learned to know when I was a research associate in Aachen, because there have been very large projects on mobility management on the European level to actually define the framework. And there was a question earlier on the mobility manager. Yeah? Here you have the mobility manager. So there's somebody that needs to coordinate all these different activities between the partners. And that is on the one hand the policy level, so it's the stakeholders, the policy makers, the decision makers. And on the other hand, it's the user level. So there's also a nice framing on mobility management. I think it's even from Martin Schreiner in his dissertation. He gave the example, and he was addressing the mobility manager to be a connecting point between the supply side, so all the transportation services that are out there, yet another car sharing provider or a new app to rent out your scooter and so on, and the users. Yeah? So connecting the demand of the users, the needs of the users, their preferences with the supply side. So making this connection, creating the networks. A bit like in German we say Makler. I don't know how to say that in English. So it's like a real estate manager, yeah, that is providing options of housing to you as a client, and you can choose then from these options. So the mobility manager is a bit like this agent to trade the different options between supply and demand. And here's the historic definition. Mobility management is primarily demand-oriented, passenger and freight transport, new partnerships and tools, and so on. The tools are usually based on information, organization, coordination, and promotion. I think that is still very much valid. Mobility management, yes, can address specific target groups. For example, there's a nice mobility management package also here in the city of Munich for elderly people or for younger people. And I've even heard of one initiative that I did like very much. I don't know if it's still up to date, that for the very nice people that are coming to us from all over the world, yeah, that we want to still have in our diverse culture, are trained in the integration courses to learn German and so on at Volkshochschule and other places, based on the example of transportation, because it's a daily need that you need to tackle. So to address these mobility questions in the classes, in the German language classes at the Volkshochschule and other institutions, to integrate into our society. I think this is a great idea, and there's a lot of different moments that you can pick from. There's also here a long list of activities. I invite you to read this from the Moodle slide deck. But generally you find a lot of activities that are on this information and advice, on the consulting, on the awareness and communication. There's, for example, also the bus to school. Do you know what this is? There is the walking bus, it's called, yeah? When you need to take your kids to school. Obviously, it's not very much recommended to bring your kids by car to school. Okay, we also did sometimes when it was raining. Yeah? But today there was an announcement that the city is going to close down school streets, so streets that are next to the school in the morning peak hour, so that people just can't drive up to the entrance door of the school and everything is crowded and dangerous. But rather kids should walk to school. Yeah? And in order to facilitate this, you are building groups of kids that are living in the same direction. And in the first weeks, you ask one of the parents to accompany these kids to school so that they learn how to move on their own. And after some weeks, they can do it on their own, but still in a group. And it's much more fun, of course, and it's very healthy and socially sustainable. This would be a nice mobility management example. Last but not least, traffic management. Again, there might be a lot of lectures on this on its own. can take into consideration passenger information and traffic control, policies and technical solutions, urban and extra-urban systems, individual and public transport. So traffic management is not something that is just for cars, but it should be for an integrated mobility system. So obviously also for public transport, nowadays perhaps also for cycling. Yeah, you have a lot of apps to improve your cycling experience, so that should be more widespread. Then also a definition here of how this architecture, let's say, of traffic management strategies is built, specific objectives that are guiding then the measures, the planning, and then goes into the technical implementation of how these traffic management systems are operated. Partly this is still quite a challenge. And last but not least, the impact on travel demand and on traffic flow. So I think here is another description from the perspective of traffic management, that you do have demand reduction, mode shift, and traffic control. And I think the focus clearly will be on traffic control. You have an indication here. I will show some examples of pre-trip information. So that means information that you get before you actually start your trip. You still have a chance to choose on how to do and when and what. And then finally the on-trip information, so information that you have during your trip, and that will probably not change your destination or your trip as such. It might change your route choice easily. So you get an information about the congestion, you will change your route. It might perhaps change your mode, and we will see that. So some examples for pre-trip information. There is a platform that is hopefully still alive, I don't know, but it's called Bayern Info, and it gives quite some complete information on the traffic situation in Bavaria. This is already quite well. On construction sites, on congestions, yeah, so that is always live and up to date. And if you plan your trip, you should use such a platform to make your choices. Most often you don't, because you have a very much, what's the name, habitualized, so a very regular trip. So you go to work every day by car and you don't think about it. But if you were more aware about potential risks, then you could look into such a platform to double check, and you will find the actual traffic situation for private cars, but also for the other modes. I think the platform is very much intermodal, so you get your trip information a bit like on Google Maps. You get an answer, how long does it take by car, how long does it take by public transport, by cycling, by walking, and so on, and you can choose. And you will perhaps get even some feedback on the traffic impacts. We have just recently finished a project on a so-called mobility score that gives you also an indication about the external costs that you are generating while choosing such a mode. So the environmental costs, the accident costs, and so on. And that's very, very nice. You have obviously similar things also for public transport, specifically in the apps, in the navigation systems of the public transport providers. In the region of Munich, you even have several providers that are competing for your attention. Yeah. It used to be the MVV, being the public transport authority, who is also providing the complete picture of all the different modes, from the subway to the S-Bahn to the regional transport, buses and so on. So they have the complete picture. But of course, in the meantime, with, for example, GTFS data as a background, anybody else can provide this. And there is also navigation apps by German Rail, the DB Navigator, or by MVG. They have now, I think, the app MVGo, that is providing this information in an integrated way. Perhaps a nice example of this combination of public transport and private car. You could also imagine that a very intelligent transportation system tells you that if you go by car into the city at 7:30 in the morning, you should perhaps rather change to public transport. And one of the crucial questions then will be, okay, I will do, but do I still find a parking at the park and ride facility? Yeah, there's also a discussion going on repeatedly, and it's coming up more clearly in the moment. Do we need to invest much more in in park and ride to facilitate the change from the regional environment by car? You don't have too many options, and then changing on the S-Bahn and other systems to go into the city center. So this is the situation at 6 a.m. It's a bit like the situation that we have seen in Weinstefan. No problem, but already at 7 it's getting more packed. And if you come too late, 8 o'clock, many of the park and ride locations are full, so you will not be able to park your car regularly on these public transport hubs. This, of course, is a big problem, because if the park and ride facility is full, basically you have two choices. Either you stick with your car and you go downtown with your car, which is not intended, or you park somewhere else next to the park and ride facility, and this very often is not very nice, because you will park in residential areas or so next to the railway station, and it's all a mess. Yeah? So at 9 it's not getting better, but it will get better then later throughout the day. So this would still be pre-trip information in a best case, so that before you start, you can have this information. And perhaps if you have the chance, you go by bike or you go by bus to the S-Bahn station and not by your car. Or perhaps you have somebody to bring you to the station or the like. Then the on-trip information in public transport. Of course, you all have your apps, and you have live information on delays or changes that you are connections that you are able to reach or not to reach. But you also have a common information displayed live in the stations and in the metro systems, and also in the buses. Also, you have an indication of the connections when you arrive at your station. Here it's Georg Brauchlering. You have the buses listed. That is live information, so you don't need to hurry to get your bus and so on. On-trip information by private car. This is also very much outdated. I don't know if it's still existing, but it has been developed in one of the research projects in the past to signalize to the car driver where on the Mittlerer Ring and where in this highway network you find congestions actually, and that you can do your choices based on this. it's largely outdated because obviously you have all kind of navigation systems and up-to-date live information on the congestion levels, and you will get your individualized route information. But the idea, of course, of a public authority not necessarily following the Google Maps advice is also to display and give such information publicly. Sometimes this is then going into a conflict, because if you have your individualized information for your destination saying you rather take this route today, and the public information is different, then you get into a conflict. Yeah? So that might be a bit of a problem in the decision making. For example, here, because of congestions in Petuel-Tunnel, the advice is to go to Olympia Park via Frankfurter Ring. Yeah? So this kind of information might be governed by a strategic idea of the public bodies, that you want to prevent congestion, that you want to make use of the highway network and not of the residential small-scale network. This might be in conflict with the individualized information that you get from your navigation system.